And so what did he have to do to get the building to behave the way the video in the middle did? He had to take out all the columns in the building at once. And compare that to NIST's computer animation, and they disprove their own theories. They release 400 structural steel connections every second, back engineering it, trying to get it to fall like the video, but they still couldn't get it to fall. So it begins to tip over and crumple like a beer can. So they stop it after 2 seconds into its collapse. That's all they release. We don't have any more after that. We would have seen a massive breaking up of the granite panels and the windows on thousands and thousands and thousands of them while the building's still in the air, but that's not what we see.
The Codega is a guide and a storyteller, escorting you through the night, lighting the way, warding off thieves, ghosts, demons, and other oddities. Along the journey, his companions would often share with him the most curious of stories that he'd record in his Codex. Perhaps you just might find yourself traveling with the Codega and sharing one of yours.
You know, people love to dismiss conspiracy theorists as crazy, but in truth, it's often the opposite. Most conspiracy thinkers aren't unhinged, they're simply unwilling to accept surface level answers. Where others see a neat story wrapped in a bow, we notice the loose threads, the contradictions, the missing pages. We think laterally, rationally, and with a broader scope of understanding that stretches beyond the headlines. Now, being a conspiracy theorist doesn't mean believing everything. It means questioning everything. It's a discipline of logic when the official story is riddled with holes. The rational mind looks for the patterns others refuse to acknowledge. In short, we're not crazy for seeing hidden hands and deeper motives. We're crazy if we don't. And as Sherlock Holmes said, when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. Now, this leads me to my red pill moment, my awakening to the reality, and where I finally started asking questions. It wasn't like I doubted everything from that moment on, but this was the moment that I said, wait a minute, this doesn't really add up. Okay, so I had befriended a prepper, and he asked me what I thought about 9/11. And at that point, I answered as how I thought I had seen it, which was 2 planes hit the buildings and they fell. Now, he didn't push me much at that point, but he told me that I really should watch this documentary called Loose Change, which I did. And the evidence and ideas put forth blew a gaping hole into what I believe to be true. Okay, so without further ado, it's time to bring my guest on. Now, I want everyone to please welcome San Francisco Bay Area architect Richard Gage, AIA, member of the American Institute of Architects and founder and former CEO of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. He now leads the charge for a new World Trade Center investigation, along with his courageous wife, Gail, at richardgage911.org. All right. Welcome to the show, Richard. I'm glad to have you on. This is something I've been looking forward to for quite a while.
Thank you, Rye. This is awesome to be here. And your audience is in for a rude awakening. not that you haven't brought the truth to them before, but those who are unfamiliar with some of the specifics that we're going to get into, we're going to prove that all 3 World Trade Center skyscrapers were brought down by explosive controlled demolition. And it's not so much that, that's fairly easy to understand. A 7th grader can get it, right? The implications of this, as you alluded to in your introduction, are really disturbing. This is cognitive dissonance that we're faced with ourselves. So Yeah, let's start, and just a little bit of a forewarning there.
I think that is a great forewarning. And it's gotten to the point now when I look at anything from 9/11, and I'm just like, why can't other people see this? Like, are they willfully now just ignoring the facts just to stick with the narrative because they'll lose the reality that they live in now? It's so blatantly obvious. It is extremely obvious, and for instance, like when I talk to some of my friends or family, some would say this is the line that they would say, that is so disrespectful. People died during that day. And I would say, well, I think it's disrespectful that we actually don't get the truth. And then I
Yeah.
would have other people say, well, what's it going to change? Like if the truth comes out, what then? And I'm like, but that is the opening. That is the door opening to you realizing how much or how deep you are in this, this grave, almost, so to speak. We're being buried so deep. So let's start from the beginning here, Richard. If you can give us a little bit of an introduction as to how you got into this, because you started out as just a regular, I don't want to say regular, but as an architect, and you were just in white collar architect. How did you end up at this point?
Yeah, I remember the day actually. It was March 29th of 2006, minding my own business in my car, walking, driving away from the construction administration site at this high school in Lafayette, California. And I was listening to this radio interview of David Ray Griffin, who was being interviewed on Bonnie Faulkner's Guns and Butter program. It was just shocking because, he, he was talking about all this evidence that we're going to be talking about today. And I'm going, what are you talking about? I would have heard. I'd know if a third tower came down on 9/11. I'm an architect. And we didn't get one bulletin from the American Institute of Architects, of which I'm more than 90,000 members. This was the third worst structural failure in modern history, after the two Twin Towers. So I had to find out if what he was saying was true. So I went, well, first of all, he was coming to speak at the Grand Lake Theater in Oakland, California. I think it was the next night. Went, and there it was packed. 600 people were there. This is in the days back in 2006 when 9/11 Truth was really starting to roll. And I couldn't even get in. They sold all the tickets. To go home and listen to the live stream, which I had to learn how to do. And I did. And I was just even more shocked. So I did some more research, found out about Stephen Jones, former nuclear physicist, professor at BYU, who had done a lot of research, did some presentations. I put together a PowerPoint. I'd never done a PowerPoint before. I'd never spoken in front of the public. I mean, I wasn't an activist, but I said to the guys at work, 14 of them, look, because they thought I was nuts, you're going to come and look at this. And I put up, I bought pizza. So they were, I
Yeah,
bribed
to
them.
entice them. Yeah, come on, come on.
Yeah.
I'll give you pizza at least. Yes.
Now, after 45 minutes of eating pizza, and with indigestion, I'm sure, as they saw a lot of evidence that day, all of them raised their hands. Oh my God, you're right. These are controlled demolitions. We've got to get a real investigation. And those are my first 14 architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. Now we have 3,600 and signed on to the petition demanding a new investigation. And that petition is at ae911truth.org, the organization I founded 19 years ago. Now, Gail and I, as you mentioned, are on our own. And for the last 3 years, and we've branched out into other conspiracies. You mentioned that there's a few others floating around. We talk about those too.
Once you start on that path, all these doors, you're like, okay, well, what's behind this door? What's behind this door? And it just opens up more and more because you've been bamboozled in this one. What's to say that the rest aren't either? And you start to look and you're like, okay, this doesn't add up.
Yeah. Not at all. And we've been lied to
Yeah.
6 ways from Sunday. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing this evidence with you.
Fantastic, fantastic. Do we want to start with the your presentation, your
Yeah.
PowerPoint? I'm sure your PowerPoint presentation from when you first showed it to your 14 other fellow architects has evolved into something much more powerful too. All right, let's get this up to onto stage here. So let's do this.
Definitely. So, we've got, again, some courage to 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 find inside, because the whole world was scammed here. I mean, we're talking about the media in the march up to war, uh, just parroting the official narrative without any scrutiny whatsoever. And our government officials, same thing. We have been lost as a society, and we were brainwashed. Most people don't even know about this third tower on 9/11. Building 7, a 47-story skyscraper, easily the tallest building in most of our states, and yet seemingly dwarfed next to the tallest buildings in the world at the time they were built, the
Yep.
Twin Towers in 1973. And but this building was about 100 yards away from the North Tower. It wasn't hit by a plane like the towers were, and yet it went down. So we're going to look at that. Now, it was hit by a few of the beams that came down on it from the Twin Towers. We'll talk about those beams and that damage to the structure. But you can see that it's standing just fine after the towers came down. In fact, here is the red area. Here we have some fairly serious damage to this building.
Okay. Yeah.
And yeah, and if wouldn't we expect that this building would fall toward that area of damage if it were to fall at all?
It would be
Uh,
like like chopping a tree. You take out the bottom half, and it's going to topple over.
yeah, but
Excuse
that's
me.
not the official theory of NIST, and we'll get to that. NIST is the the National Institute of Standards and Technology, who was tasked by Congress to explain these collapses to the American people. And here's how. Well, let's look at this collapse. They said that damage was not a factor in this building's collapse, not a significant factor. And so let's take a look at that collapse. First of all, the east penthouse in the upper left, it comes down in an isolated event 6 seconds before the whole building does this. Straight down, suddenly, uniformly,
Perfectly.
symmetrically. Yeah, perfectly, in under 7 seconds. Now,
I never paid attention to that penthouse you pointed out at the top before. That's the first time I actually really had my attention drawn to that. So that's interesting. It just neatly, nicely, just kind of crumples itself, and then
yep. And it is an isolated event, because you can see nothing below it has happened other than a dozen broken windows.
yes, exactly.
So, yeah, and here's NIST, Shyam Sunder, the project leader of NIST. Here's what he says.
What we found was that uncontrolled building fires caused an extraordinary event. The collapse of World Trade Center 7 was primarily due to fire.
Fires. Okay, well, we can look at those fires. We have photographs and videos of them. They're few, they're small, and they're scattered throughout the building.
Nothing too major. Yes.
Right. I mean, it's not bad at all. And those fires were burned out on the 12th floor, which NIST says is its area of initiation collapse. And we'll get to that. But they have this incredible fire simulation theory. They say the fires were raging in this area. Well, wait a minute. No, the photos show that they were burned out on that whole floor over an hour before the building's collapse. So why are you making this big deal about these fires beginning at about 4 p.m., implying that they're burning up to the time of the collapse? Complete problem for the official narrative. So we've been manipulated. We've been scammed by this government agency under the Department of Commerce, whose leadership had been changed out when the Bush administration came in. Hey, we've never lost a steel frame, fire protected structure ever. And there are dozens and dozens of these types of fires in these types of buildings. Not before 9/11, nor after 9/11, where we have fully engulfed fires in engulfing these buildings. So we have to ask ourselves, okay, if fire didn't bring this building down, what might have? Well, let's do side-by-side comparison. A series of known controlled demolitions on the left, building 7 on the right. Is there any similarity?
It's a little too similar. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. It's too
Is
perfect. Yeah.
Is there enough similarity at least to warrant an investigation into the possible use of explosives, especially since this fire, this building, fires have never brought these types of buildings down before in history, ever.
And the fires you're saying started at 350 and the building came down at 520. So that
No,
is
I didn't
like,
say that.
oh, okay, sorry.
I said the fire started actually at about noon. They were noticed.
Okay.
And they were burned out by 350 on that floor.
I understand.
And many of the other floors. And so how could the fires have caused the thermal expansion of long-span steel beams, which NIST claims caused this building's collapse eventually? So we have to ask ourselves, hey, does it have any of the features of typical controlled demolition? Well, yeah, let's look at them. Here's feature number 1. Is there a sudden onset of destruction? Let's listen to Dan Rather, who narrates this view of the building's collapse that evening.
What you're seeing are high shots. Now, here we're going to show you a videotape of the collapse itself.
Describe that.
Now we go to videotape, the collapse of this building.
It's amazing.
Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
What? Deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down? Well, he's never used those words again after 9/11, interestingly. In fact, we've never seen this building's collapse after 9/11. It's just been swept under the rug. So let's go on to feature number 2. Is there a straight down symmetrical collapse into the building's footprint? Let's look from West Street. Pretty darn straight, pretty darn symmetrical. How do you do that, Rye? You got to take out all the core columns at once within a fraction of a second of each other, followed about a second later by the perimeter columns. And then you have to repeat that on several floors, if not all of them, to bring this building straight down. Any deviation in that pattern, well, in the building you'd expect would tip over. Do these fires have that level of precision? That's what we're talking about here. If you don't get it just right, you can have major problems in controlled demolitions like that. And somebody has to go back into that building and replace those charges that didn't go off.
The new guy's got to go back and fix that.
yeah, the new guy. And buildings are damaged on one side, they fall to that side. And if building 7 was damaged on the northeast corner by those fires, you'd expect it to fall over that way as well. So how fast is this building coming down? Feature number 4. David Chandler, physics teacher, identifies that very carefully that it comes down at 2/3 of at free fall acceleration. And how fast is that? As fast as a bowling ball falling out of the sky. Well, the bowling ball had no resistance under it, so it could fall that fast. This building had 40,000 tons of structural steel, 3 to 5 times stronger than it needed to be to support the building. And that's why NIST denied for years before they finally admitted in their final report that it did come down at free fall. They were publicly embarrassed by members of AE 9/11 Truth, including David Chandler and Stephen Jones. And they finally admit, well, you're right, it did come down at free fall. But they don't acknowledge the implications of that free fall, which are what? That all of these columns gave way at once. Again,
which is impossible for that to happen naturally.
Especially with these fires.
Exactly.
I mean,
and how you described it, you said that the interior columns had to be taken out first and then the exterior perimeter. It's exactly how it falls. You can see it kind of cave in just a fraction of a second before in the top, and then it just falls, just like I said, it's like a free fall.
That brings the exterior walls on top of the interior instead of letting them tip over. They're pulled in by the interior because there's beams that connect those two, obviously. So no, those fires didn't do that. So let's look at the structure itself. Do we have the total dismemberment of this steel frame? We had a 47-story moment-resisting steel frame structure. That's where the columns and beams are rigidly welded one to another. It's ductile. It's designed to flex and bend. That's what steel does, especially moment-resisting steel frame buildings. They don't fall like a house of cards, and neither do other types of buildings, in this case, concrete buildings, in earthquakes. They fall over to the path of least resistance. The columns and beams are not severed one from another. The building is recognizable as a building when it falls. But these few small scattered fires brought this building down virtually all at once. Not buying it. What could have brought it down? Well, if it were explosions, we'd expect to have witnesses of explosions. NIST says there were no witnesses of explosions at this building. Here's a half a dozen of them. Here's Daryl, a medical student, talking about being interviewed on the radio that evening.
We were watching the building actually because it was on fire. The bottom floors of the building were on fire, and we heard this sound that sounded like a clap of thunder. Turned around, we were shocked to see that the building was it looked like there was a shock wave ripping through the building, and the windows all busted out, and it was horrifying. And then about a second later, the bottom floor caved out, and the building followed after that, and we saw the building crash down all the way to the ground.
Okay, a sound of a clap of thunder, the shock wave ripping through the building, the windows busting out, and then the building coming down. This is a very specific order of events. We're going to hear from Kevin McPadden, former Air Force medic.
You heard explosions, like boom. It's like a distinct sound. It's not like when in compression, like boom, 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 like floors that were dropping and collapsing. This was boom, and like you felt a rumble in the ground, like almost like you wanted to grab onto something. That, to me, I knew that was an explosion. There was no doubt in my mind.
No doubt in Bill Rosati's mind what he saw.
I was standing like 2 blocks away, and all of a sudden I just seen a big flash, and then I seen the building coming down, and I just seen people just running everywhere, chaotic like.
Okay, that's helpful. And Captain Richard Patterson of the New York Fire Department.
1-7 let go as well, and was a series of concussive explosions.
And first responder Patrick
I remember
Dillon.
feeling that, like it was like freight trains underneath the earth, shaking the earth, even shaking me. That's when we all saw Building 7 crumple in the middle, like way up at the top. It buckled, and then dropped.
Okay, this is very helpful. What did the Deputy Director of New York's Office of Emergency Management see?
Then he had to go into that building to assess it.
You could hear the building creak above us. You could hear things fall. You could hear the fire burning. You could see columns just hanging from the upper floors, gaping holes in the floors up above us. There was an elevator car that was blown out of its shaft and it was down the hall.
an elevator car blown out of its shaft down the hall. I mean, here's the elevators. They're in the center of the building. This wasn't from some of that damage that was happening down in the southwest corner of this building.
How does a fire do that? How does a
In
fire
this area,
blow out
lower left.
a elevator?
Exactly. How does an out of its hoistway and landing down the hall? I mean, these explosions are witnessed by others as well, including Barry Jennings and Mayor Giuliani's attorney, Michael Hess, who were called to a meeting in this building, but they were late. They didn't realize the entire building had been evacuated, but they just go wandering into the building after the planes hit the towers. But before they came down, well before they came down, this is their experience inside the building.
When we got to the 8th floor, I started walking to one side of the building. That side of the building was gone. The first explosion I heard when I was on the stairwell landing, when we made it down to the 6th floor. Then we made it back to the 8th floor. I heard some more explosions.
What's the sound?
Like a boom, like an explosion.
More than one?
Yes. We started walking down the stairs. We made it to the 8th floor. Big explosion. Blew us back into the 8th floor. When we get outside, a police officer comes to me and says, you have to run. We have more information of bombs, so you have to run.
Information of bombs. Bombs like this heard in the late morning of 9/11 by these firefighters?
Yeah, here's one of the guys. He can tell you I'm okay, all right? Here, hold on. You want to call your mother or something?
No witnesses of explosions. NIST claims to have interviewed at least more than 100 first responders. They missed all of these. So it's been swept under the rug. The history's been rewritten here. If this were a controlled demolition, we'd know about it in advance. Not we necessarily, but some people would, like these people, like Chief Nick Visconti, for instance. We're moving the command post over this way. That building's coming down. Wait a minute. No steel frame fire-protected structure has ever collapsed due to fire in history. And now he knows it's going to be coming down. Well, listen to Chief Hayden, who's very
well.
Sure.
We had our special operations people set up surveying instruments to monitor and see if there was any movement in the building. We're concerned of the possibility of collapse of the building, and we had a discussion with one particular engineer there, and we asked him if we allowed it to burn, could we anticipate a collapse, and if so, how soon? And it turned out that he was pretty much right on the money, that he said in its current state you have about 5 hours.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Not only is it going to come down, but it's going to come down in 5 hours. A completely unprecedented event with this degree of surety. It does come down in 5 hours too, by the way.
A bit of a fortune teller.
Oh, yeah, he's good. This prediction, of course, could only have been made with foreknowledge. They won't release the name of this engineer. We can't talk to him and find out what his thinking was. But listen to these mysterious construction workers walking away from Building 7, hearing an explosion over their shoulder, then looking back at the building and looking straight into the CNN camera and saying,
You hear that? Keep your eye on that building. It'll be coming down. The building is about to blow up. Move it back. All right, guys? Sorry.
We are walking back. There's a building about to blow up. Flame, debris coming down.
The building is about to blow up, flame and debris coming down. No, it's not only going to blow up, come down by fire, but it's going to blow up. So we're getting a real strong piece of surety here. But listen to what this first responder heard from the battalion chiefs.
And he pointed to what turned out to be the entrance to Building 7's lobby. He said, go in there, take a break. There's other guys in there, like that. And that's what I did. I finished coming down off the pile and climbed over the wreckage of Vesey, and went in those revolving doors and just kind of fell on the floor. There were other guys in there doing the same thing I was, just shaking their heads and spitting out poison and trying to get their lungs back together again, as I was. And I was on the floor. These battalion chiefs come in through the revolving doors. There was 3 of them. They had the white helmets. I didn't get any IDs off them. But as soon as they stepped inside, what stepped in behind them were these 2 people in black with black ski masks on and Uzis. And the Uzis were, hanging off their necks. And I don't know what they were or who they were, but the battalion chiefs started yelling at us, right? Ordering us to get out of this building, get out of this building. They're going to pull the building. Everybody out now. And they ordered us back out.
They're going to pull the building. Pull it is a term used in the controlled demolition industry. And regarding those guys with guns, we hadn't heard this before, but it's corroborated by Captain Patterson.
So he and I made our way over to the entrance of the building. Before we arrived there was a construction worker who happened to he emerged from the dust cloud and walked past the chief and I. And he said he had overheard the chief's comment, and he paused and said, "That'll be coming down around 5 o'clock. We part ways. We arrive at 7, and there were 2 paramilitarily clad men with black rifles, sunglasses. And as we approached the entrance, they closed ranks and said, one of them said, "This building has been secured," which is odd because in my experience in the FDNY, anybody preventing access to the fire department in the event of a fire, that's a criminal act. The chief and I were not in a position to argue the point, given the inequality in weaponry present.
To say the least.
That'll be coming down around 5 o'clock, this mysterious gentleman told him. How does he know this? And it did. Again, let's go back to Kevin McPadden, who we heard as a witness of explosions. But before that, he's listening to a radio held in the hand of a Red Cross worker, or who we believe to be a Red Cross worker. And this is what he heard.
At the last few seconds, he took his hand off, and you heard 3, 2, 1.
Wait a minute. 2 fires bring buildings down to countdowns? What's going on here? Something's shaping up. Well, the BBC knew about it 20 minutes before it happened. Oops.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were. And it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy.
Sketchy indeed. The building standing still, also standing.
You can see it right behind her. Yeah, right behind her as she's telling her that that they knew it had already fallen. But yeah, that's a little.
Yeah, they apologize for this grievous error, citing the confusing events of the day. What does that make them psychic or something?
Exactly.
CNN announces a collapse that morning, though. This is very interesting. Listen to this.
In New York, Alan Dobbs-Frank joins us on the phone in Lower Manhattan. Alan,
just 2 or 3 minutes ago, there was yet another collapse or explosion. I'm now out of sight. A Good Samaritan has taken me in on Duane Street. But at 11:15, there was another collapse or explosion following the 10:30 collapse of the second tower. And a firefighter who rushed by us estimated that 50 stories went down. The street filled with smoke. It was like a forest fire roaring down a canyon. Now, as I think Patty Sabga and others have told you, all of Manhattan is covered, downtown Manhattan is covered with thick white ash and building material.
Interesting. Had that building come down at that time, there's no other 50-story building that went down. Building 7 is the only building that collapsed. As a matter of fact, other buildings were badly damaged. But had it come down at that time, we wouldn't have any video evidence of it coming down. Why? Because of the massive dust and smoke clouds released when the Twin Towers came down 15 minutes before that. Maybe it was supposed to go down at that time under the cover of those clouds. Maybe it was a dud. And those mysterious construction workers walking away from Building 7, hearing the explosion over their shoulder, maybe they were going back to fix it or had come back from fixing it. It's entirely possible. And then it would have...
That would explain the elevators blowing out, and you were saying before there was some other one of the fire chiefs was walking through. One of them was walking through and say, like there's beams hanging. It could be exactly like you said, that this was a misfire and they sent the new guys back to go fix it.
Yeah, and there were people in that building at the time, like Barry Jennings. They were lucky to be alive. What do the experts say about this building? Danny Jowenko, one of the top European controlled demolition firms, here's what
Danny Jowenko is the expert on this in Europe. What did he say?
Dit is controlled demolition. Zeker weten. Zeker weten. Er is nagesprongen. Dit is in opdracht gebeurd. Het heeft een team gedaan van experts.
A higher job done by a team of experts. How about one of the 36 structural engineers signed on to the petition demanding a new investigation, like Kamal Obeid, who says a localized failure in a steel frame building like World Trade Center 7 cannot cause a catastrophic collapse like a house of cards without a simultaneous and pattern loss of several of its columns at key locations within the building. Does that sound like something fire is going to accomplish? No. This got the attention of one of the top forensic structural engineers in the country, Professor Leroy Hulsey at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks, who commenced on a 4-year, $300,000 study to determine the cause of this building's collapse with 2 competing software programs designed to corroborate each other or not. And they did. They found that if columns 79, 80, and 81 did not fail, or did fail, the building would have tipped over. Oh, where's that? Here. And so that's intuitive, right? It would tip towards its injured side. And so what did he have to do to get the building to behave the way the video in the middle did? He had to take out all the columns in the building at once. And compare that to NIST's computer animation, and they disprove their own theories. They release 400 structural steel connections every second, back engineering it, trying to get it to fall like the video, but they still couldn't get it to fall. So it begins to tip over and crumple like a beer can. So they stop it after 2 seconds into its collapse. That's all they release. We don't have any more after that.
Nothing more.
We would have seen a massive breaking up of the granite panels and the windows on thousands and thousands and thousands of them while the building's still in the air, but that's not what we see. Only a couple of dozen windows broken. What were their findings? Fire did not cause the collapse of this building. Temperatures were not high enough to cause a weakening of the steel framing. Thermal expansion did not result in a loss of support for the beams and girders. And the collapse of this building was a global failure involving what? The near simultaneous failure of every column in the building, not a progressive collapse as claimed by NIST. So they've completely pulled the rug out from underneath NIST in this. NIST was tasked by Congress to explain these collapses to the American people, but they failed miserably in this fraud. And yeah, so that's what we have we have to ask ourselves, what did bring this building down? Because Professor Halsey at the University of Alaska didn't go that far. He just said, okay, what didn't bring it down? Fire did not bring this down. So we pick up where he left off. And who gives it to us? FEMA. In their report in 2002, Building Performance Assessment Team report, they put it in Appendix C. It was a metallurgical examination of the steel. What did they find? Never before observed eutectic reactions. These are complex chemical reactions involving intergranular melting. That's 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, melting of steel. Solid steel girder into Swiss cheese, like we see in this piece of World Trade Center 7 steel, with silver dollar size holes in the ends of the beam. Well, interesting. Where did this come from? The fire doesn't melt steel in office fire conditions. So what can produce this? What else did they find? Rapid oxidation, sulfidation, liquid iron. That's molten iron. That's exceeding 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Sulfur formed during this hot corrosion attack on the steel. They identify all this, but they don't go any further. They don't say, what could have caused it? What could have caused molten iron? What could have caused sulfidation, sulfur? What could have caused that? It's perhaps the deepest mystery uncovered in the investigation, says the New York Times. But it's completely omitted from the NIST report. And they say, well, where did the sulfur come from? Gosh, NIST says the sulfur could have come from the gypsum board because there's calcium sulfate in gypsum board. Wait a minute. Gypsum board has been used for 100 years to protect steel. It's never turned around and attacked the steel that is designed to protect.
Exactly. It's a bit of a fire prevention as well, retardant, I guess you would say.
Oh, very, very excellent retardant. That's why we use gypsum board in our houses for the most part, too. And steel members in the debris pile appear to have been partly evaporated in extraordinarily high temperatures, says Jonathan Barnett. But it takes 4,000 degrees to evaporate steel, and this fire protection engineer knows this. He's the FEMA report author. Where did the 4,000 degrees come from? Here's evidence of evaporated steel. And structural engineer Abelhazen Nastani Azl from UC Berkeley, who received a National Science Foundation grant to study the steel, says it. I saw melting of girders in the World Trade Center. Well, we see them in the photos too. The melting of steel and or molten iron. Either way, we know what its temperature is by its color. We're exceeding 2,500 degrees here. Office fires don't get this hot. Jet fuel doesn't even get this hot. And we're talking now about all 3 towers with the evidence of extreme heat. Jet fuel, according to this engineering firm, burns only 600 degrees Fahrenheit. Some say twice that. But still, we're way under 3,000 and 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So what can create these temperatures? Well, fires only get, in the worst fires, 1,830 degrees. This is the worst case conservative test procedures, numbers that they use to test. What can get this hot? It's not that difficult, Rye. All we have to do is look at thermite, an incendiary used by the military to cut through steel like a hot knife through butter. What is it anyway?
An incendiary used by the military? Thermite is a compound of iron oxide and aluminum, which when ignited sustains an extreme heat reaction, creating molten iron. In just 2 seconds, thermite can reach temperatures over 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit, quite enough to liquefy steel. We know that open-air fires cannot burn hot enough to melt steel, but metal had melted at the base of the towers. Appendix C of the FEMA report describes sulfur residues on the World Trade Center steel. The New York Times called this the deepest mystery of all. Sulfur slightly lowers the melting point of iron, and iron oxide and iron sulfide had formed on the surface of the structural steel. Sulfur used with thermite is called thermate, producing even faster results.
Very interesting, because if thermite were used, it would explain the incredible heat, 4,000 degree temperatures. It would explain the presence of sulfur, which is added to thermite to become thermate, much more effective at cutting through steel. It would also explain the evidence of the other evidence of ignited incendiaries in the World Trade Center dust found by the U.S. Geological Survey, molten iron, Fe. Interesting. In 2005, they produced their report of the findings of what's in the World Trade Center dust samples, analyzing hundreds of them. And what do they find? Billions of previously molten iron microspheres. Wait a minute. Previously molten, that's 3,000 degrees. Iron, that's the byproduct of thermite. Microspheres, when you get thermite or water or anything explosively aerosolized like this, it turns into spheres. In the case of molten iron, cools and falls with all the rest of the dust. It's in all the dust samples. The EPA says it's a signature component. It's not even World Trade Center dust unless it has all these previously molten iron microspheres in it. They're up to 6% of some of these samples, up to 4 tons of this altogether. Yet the U.S. Geological Survey doesn't even guess where they came from. R.J. Lee doesn't either, but they say they're formed during the event, not before, by the welders putting the building together, not afterward, by the iron workers taking the collapsed building apart, but during the event. Well, we don't have to guess. We can do an experiment. Experiment is the arbiter of competing hypotheses. Let's do one. Let's burn some thermite and see what happens. Looks like sparks, thousands of them, but they cool and they fall into the pan as previously molten iron microspheres, which were found throughout all the World Trade Center dust samples, from river to river across lower Manhattan, all these dust samples. What else did they find? That was all evidence of ignited thermite, molten metal, molten iron, previously molten iron microspheres. Is there any evidence of unignited thermite in the World Trade Center dust? Well, yeah, a team of 8 international scientists led by Niels Harrit in Copenhagen finds and documents from 7 independently collected samples that were sent to them these curious red-gray chips. They thought they were paint. They look like paint. They're dual layered, red on one side, gray on the other. Unlike primer paint, though, which has a lot of iron in it, these chips are responsive to a magnet. Primer paint is not. So they get real curious. They zoom in, analyze the red layer, and they find what? Aluminum and iron, the key ingredients of thermite, and manganese, a key ingredient of thermate. And they get real curious. They go, what are the ingredients of thermite doing in the paint chips from the World Trade Center? Oh, they get real curious. They zoom in 50,000 times with an electron microscope. And they find nano-sized particles of iron oxide crystals and aluminum powder. These are 1,000 times smaller than the diameter of a human hair. And they're set in this matrix, this bed of oxygen, silica, and carbon, which is organic material, which is used in TNT to expand rapidly because it turns into a gas and knocks things over. That's how high energy explosives work. Whereas incendiaries work by means of burning things up at extremely high temperatures. They get real curious. They look at the peer-reviewed literature and they say, well, this is called super thermite. Lawrence Livermore Lab did peer-reviewed studies on this before 2001. And they call it super thermite with explosive composites based on thermite reactions whose fuel and oxidizer constituents are intimately mixed at the nanometer size scale. You see, when you get these particles so small, the surface volume increases exponentially, which means that you have instantaneous chemical reactions. So you've engineered an incendiary to become more explosive. And interestingly, in this heater, a differential scanning calorimeter, which measures the resultant energy, when upon ignition of these chips at Lawrence Livermore Lab, they ignite, proving that they're an exothermic reaction. And that's exactly what the samples from the team of 8 scientists did with their chips. They all ignite. So this is super thermite. That's what they found. That's what they documented. It's proven. But more interestingly, what do they produce when they ignite? Molten iron microspheres with the same chemical signature as the molten iron microspheres found and documented in all the World Trade Center dust by R.J. Lee group and the U.S. Geological Survey. So we know exactly where those previously molten iron microspheres came from, as if we didn't. They're found attached to partially ignited red-gray chips, as you see here and here. So this is a self-corroborating set of repeatable experimental data that could put a lot of people away for the crimes of mass murder and treason in a court of law or grand jury. It's not made in a cave in Afghanistan. This is very sophisticated stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so what do they document at the Open Chemical Physics Journal in this peer-reviewed study? The red layer is active, unreacted thermitic material incorporating nanotechnology. It's a highly energetic pyrotechnic or explosive material. There's no doubt about it. This is 2009. We've had this for over 10 years, 15 years, and we've given it to every member of Congress, the media, and others, and it is just mums. They do not want to talk about this stuff. But what we've done is proven with regard to Building 7 and partially with the Twin Towers with the evidence of extreme heat, the 10 key characteristic features of controlled demolition and some very uncharacteristic features with incendiaries. Incendiaries are typically not used in controlled demolitions. They're more expensive, they're more unwieldy, but they don't have the bright flash that RDX and C4 do. They don't have the big bang, the audio and visual signatures of controlled demolition. They didn't want to give those away, but they had other signatures, which we've been looking at here, which still give them away. But if people will actually listen, this is direct evidence of destruction with explosives. Fire doesn't create any one of these features, let alone all 10 of them. With additional circumstantial evidence and corroborative testimony, this is proof of controlled demolition, a body of proof which has convinced 3,600 architects and engineers to demand a new investigation. And many of them appear in our ongoing series, 9/11 Crime Scene to Courtroom, an unprecedented film series taking the hard evidence of the 9/11 crimes to court, where Mick Harrison, of the litigation director for the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry, and myself are providing this evidence along with experts in the boardroom with the grand jury, presenting to them the explosive destruction of the towers and the evidence for controlled demolition. Take a look.
No matter how improbable the conclusion may appear, when you've eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
We're bringing alive in the film the 60 exhibits of the 9/11 WTC evidence contained in the Lawyers Committee grand jury petition that have already been submitted to the U.S. Attorney in Manhattan to present to a special criminal jury. This historic investigation is ongoing, and there's a role for you in it. Yes, you can help us bring the real perpetrators to justice. Through this film series, we're bringing together 24 experts in their fields.
They ignored any scenario involving incendiaries.
Demolition work, you're going to set charges on each floor.
The building could not have been brought down by office fires.
In other words, all of the interior columns over 8 stories came down, were basically lost at once.
I could make out what looked like from a science fiction movie, molten lava, okay?
And he paused and said, that'll be coming down around 5 o'clock.
We'll be filming these evidence presentations, not only for our filings with the grand jury, also as presentations to each of you.
We're inviting you to serve as virtual grand juror during each episode. And we've released 3 episodes already. You can see them right here at 911c2c.org. And we encourage you to look at the 4th episode as well, which is coming out in a week. Very excited to bring that to everybody. And we have to ask ourselves, well, wait a minute. If Building 7 was a controlled demolition, and I believe we've just proven that it was 6 ways from
Hands
Sunday.
down. Yeah.
We have to ask ourselves, is it possible that the destruction of these towers was a controlled, not so controlled actually, a demolition also? And let's find out. After all, just look at the upward, outward arching streamers, a geometry of fireworks, freely flying structural steel sections weighing 4 and 8 tons, laterally ejected at 80 miles an hour, clocked by physicists, landing 600 feet in every direction, trailed by thick white smoke clouds. Wait a minute. Why are thick white smoke clouds trailing hundreds of steel sections? Steel is not flammable in office fire conditions or jet fuel, as we saw. What are these thick white smoke clouds? Well, let's burn some thermite and find out. This is indeed a thick white smoke cloud. So if thermite cutter charges were installed on the columns and beams, that's one reason they might be trailing thick white smoke clouds. Let's start, though, with the features of controlled demolition. Do we have any? Is there a sudden onset of destruction? Feature number 1. Well, the North Tower is standing still, and all of a sudden, it's in uniform downward motion. No jolt, no hesitation upon impact of the cold, hard steel below. Same with the South Tower. It's standing at rest, and all of a sudden, it's in uniform downward motion. It makes no sense. It should be slowing down, stopping. Well, when this tells us, well, the upper part drove the rest of the building down to the ground and then destroyed itself. They get this from Zdeněk Bazant in Chicago, in Northwestern University in Chicago, and who submitted this peer-reviewed, very complex peer-reviewed paper, a piece of mathematical wizardry that took engineers 10 years to decode. He submitted it just 2 days after 9/11.
That's convenient.
Just very incredible and very obscured logic in it. We'll come back to that. But it suffers from one universal law already, and that is an equal and opposite destructive force when two bodies collide. The light body and a heavy body, a Volkswagen and a Mack truck. What happens? The Volkswagen gets destroyed, right? It's not going to destroy the Mack truck. Doesn't matter if we drop the Volkswagen onto the Mack truck. No. If the upper, lightest, weakest part of the structure cannot possibly destroy the cold, hard, heavier, intact steel below. This is steel core columns that get heavier and bigger as you go down until halfway down, they're 52 inches by 22 inches. And then the steel begins to infill. As you get down to the bottom, it's almost solid steel. Is the Volkswagen going to destroy that? No, not going to happen. I'll make it easier for you, though. Let's look at the Volkswagen. In fact, look here. The lower red line, the point of plane impacts. Is this upper body destroying the lower body? Or is the Volkswagen being destroyed in the first couple of seconds here?
That's exactly what it looks like. It looks like it's being destroyed, obliterated before it even hits the semi truck.
Yeah, it's telescoping in on itself. We can talk about what is destroying it, but we've already seen the evidence of extreme heat. If it were there, we would have seen it. But none of the photographs, none of the videos show an upper part destroying the lower part. It's gone after 3 or 4 seconds. And if it were there, it would have destroyed or crushed these few remaining core columns that stand 800 feet in the air for about 6 seconds. And then another explosion apparently takes out the bottom of them, and they fall frame by frame through the dust that's been shaken off of them. After all, what are we talking about? Let's compare it to a controlled, to a volcano, volcanic eruption, in the Tongan Sea. Which one's which? You can hardly tell the difference, right? Upward, outward, arching streamers, a geometry of fireworks, freely flying structural steel sections weighing 4 and 8 tons, laterally ejected at 80 miles an hour, clocked by physicists, landing 600 feet in every direction. This is not a natural building collapse. And yet even myself and most other architects and engineers bought the official story that said that this building was collapsing. Well, that's what we were told. It's proven to be a lie, though. It's not crushed down. It's out, exploding outward, away from these core columns, leaving some of them intact for a few seconds before they are then destroyed. So we have to ask ourselves, what could do this? Well, explosions can do this, certainly. Do we have witnesses of explosions? Yeah, 156 of them. Recorded orally within a month after 9/11. 12,000 pages of testimony read by Professor Graham McQueen. He found 156 of these first responders are witnesses of explosions. I'm going to read every one of them to you. No, but I'll give you a couple. We felt the ground shake. We could see the tower sway, and then it just came down. You can hear the specific order of events again and again. They're hearing something, they're seeing something, they're feeling something before the tower actually comes down. And this tells us, oh, well, anybody who heard explosions, that was the tower coming down. Well, listen to some of these. All of a sudden, the ground just started shaking. Felt like a train running under my feet. The next thing we know, we look up and the tower is collapsing. It shook my bones. Shortly before the first tower came down, I remember feeling the ground shaking. I heard a terrible noise, and then debris just started flying everywhere. I saw a flash, flash, flash at the lower level of the building. You know, like when they demolish a building? With each popping sound, initially an orange, and then a red flash came out of the building. Then it would just go all the way around the building on both sides. Saw a number of brief light sources being emitted from inside the building between floors 10 and 15. He saw about 6 of these brief flashes accompanied by a crackling sound before the tower collapsed. I saw low-level flashes. I saw a flash, flash, flash. And then it looked like the building came down. An explosion appeared at the very top. Simultaneously, from all four sides, material shot out horizontally. And then there seemed to be a momentary delay before you could see the beginning of the collapse. How specific does this fire chief need to be, this expert witness? There was an explosion in the South Tower, one floor under another. When it hit about the 5th floor, I figured it was a bomb because it looked like a synchronized, deliberate kind of thing. It seemed like on television when they blow up all these buildings. It seemed like it was going all the way around like a belt. All these explosions. The building was blowing out on all four sides. You actually heard the pops, you know? You heard the pops of the building. I thought the terrorists planted explosives somewhere in the building. That's how loud it was. A crackling explosive. Another loud boom at the upper floors. And then a series of smaller explosions which appeared to go completely around the building at the upper floors. And another loud earth-shattering blast with a large fireball that blew out more debris. The lower level of the building, you know, like when they demolish a building? That's what I thought I saw. You see any flashes? I said, yeah. I thought it was just me. He said, no, I saw them too. Everybody, I think, at this point still thought these things were blown up. So I was fully expecting anything else to blow up. You were there when the planes hit? No, I was there when the building exploded. Exploded. You mean when it fell down? No, when it exploded. He's darn sure what he saw. So feature number 3, do we have a straight down symmetrical collapse? Well, actually, the South Tower begins to tip over. It tips over at 22 degrees here. So we have asymmetrical loading on the building below, asymmetrical damage from the fires, asymmetrical damage from the plane damage. How in the world then do we get complete symmetrical damage all the way down from the point of plane impacts to the ground? It makes no sense. It's a complete non sequitur. Just like the firefighters described, all the way around like a belt, all these explosions. Well, the leading corner of those explosions are visible here in this looped video, where we see at least a dozen intense explosions repeated again and again, and some squibs or isolated explosive ejections down below there. This is not a nuclear weapon going off, by the way, for those that have heard that this is such. No, these are individual explosions which had to be pre-placed in the exterior structural steel framing, and then they're going off floor by floor. That's what we're seeing here. It's not directed energy weapons either.
No,
by the way.
I've heard that too. I've heard some people say that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So these are clearly explosions, and much of the rest of this presentation will witness to that. So we have isolated explosive ejections also, feature number 4 of controlled demolition, occurring 20 stories down below, 40 stories down below. And these squibs or isolated explosive ejections occur as far down as 60 stories down below. There's no accounting for these whatsoever in the official narrative. So they can only be like mistimed explosions. And so we have a dozen of them going off on the left side of the South Tower as it begins to lean right, all at once almost. And now we know why these upper sections are being destroyed and that they can't then drive the rest of the building down to the ground if their internal rigidity has been compromised through this mechanism. How fast is the building coming down? Feature number 5, we have David Chandler once again documenting for us that it comes down almost at free fall acceleration, 2/3 of free fall acceleration. It's not slowing down the upper part as it meets the cold, hard steel below. In fact, the calculation is such that it means that 90% of the structure has been removed. So it could come down almost at free fall acceleration. What structure? That structure. There's almost more steel than glass, almost as much steel as glass in the exterior structural steel system.
That's incredible.
And yet, where did it go? Yeah, it's incredible. 90% of it got removed somehow. Well, we've been seeing the evidence of that. There are 47 massive steel core columns in the center structure, surrounded by 240 perimeter columns that we see, for instance, here. Oh, come on. Anyway, that we saw there on the right side. Go ahead.
No. That's good. That's good. Yeah.
And so we have to ask ourselves, what is this? What happened to those perimeter structural steel systems? Well, they're impaled on skyscrapers all around. 500 feet away here, 600 feet away on the left, destroying the winter gardens of the World Financial Center, destroying the Deutsche Bank building. These 4-ton and 8-ton structural steel sections that are 3 columns vertically and 3 spandrel panels horizontally, tying them together. You can see the bolt holes that connect one set of columns to the other. And those bolts were simply sheared off. You hardly see any evidence of them. You don't in the ends of this section. So all the plane had to do was to push in these structural steel sections and shear those bolts, 4 bolts in times 3 is 12. Excuse me. Yeah, 4 times 3 is 12. I got it.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
so we could stop, start, and see the freely flying structural steel sections, again, weighing 4 and 8 tons, in this case, about to hit building 7. Wait a minute. Back 2, forward 2, back 2. It starts out horizontal. How does gravity work, Rye? Works down. Yeah. What's going on here? It's been blasted out with a whole lot of force until gravity begins to take over, and then you get a 45-degree angle here before it hits building 7. There's enough energy here to hurl a 200-pound cannonball 3 miles. This is a lot of energy. And where did that energy come from? Not from the fires, not from the kinetic energy of the building falling. They are hurled out of there, trailing what? Thick white smoke clouds again. Steel is not flammable in office fire conditions or jet fuel. So we've got a 1,200-foot diameter, 1,400-foot diameter, really, around each of these towers. And by the way, if 100,000 tons, which is how much steel there was in each tower, is distributed outside the footprint of the tower, as you can see here, what's crushing the building?
Great question. Great question. Exactly.
This is it's a third of the weight of the building. It's not available to crush the building if it's 600 feet outside the perimeter. It wasn't crushing the building at all. Maybe it was the concrete. Let's look, because we're missing some concrete. 110 floors, each an acre in size. We'd expect to see 100 floors at least pancaked on top of each other. These were 4 and 8 inch thick concrete poured on metal decking, supported by lightweight steel trusses. But we don't find 50 of these floors. We don't find 10 of these floors. We don't find 1 acre-size floor, or a half acre, quarter acre, 16th acre, or even less than that. Where are they? In a real pancaking collapse, we see pancakes like this earthquake in Myanmar, which destroyed this building in Bangkok, Thailand. This was only a 33-story building. And look at the size of that pile of pancakes compared to those individuals in the lower right. We had 110 floors, but we don't find them. Where did they go? We're missing 100,000 tons, no, 90,000 tons of concrete. Oh, there it is, Rye. It's pulverized in midair. 90,000 tons of concrete, pulverized to a fine powder. Now, was it pulverized by high energy explosives? Or was it decomposed? Was the concrete decomposed by the temperatures of nano-thermite sprayed on the bottom of each concrete floor? Because American Society of Testing and Materials report number C856 finds that at 1500 degrees Fahrenheit, we have white powdered decomposed hydration products. In other words, concrete returns to its prehydrated composition: gravel, sand, aggregate, and cement powder. That's what we've recently found.
That's intriguing, and very intriguing that it. So the theory is that they sprayed the bottom of these of the floors.
And I'll show you how they had that opportunity.
Love to see it.
Coming right up. So the concrete's pulverized in midair, 90,000 tons of it, to essentially 100 micron particles is what is discovered by the USGS. And spread from river to river, 3 square miles of lower Manhattan, 3-inch thick blanket of dust spread all over. Well, if that's true, is it available to crush the building? This was another third of the weight of this building, together with the steel. That's 2/3 the weight of the building that's not available to crush it. But wait a minute. Zdeněk Bazant from Northwestern University used all of that weight in his mathematical wizardry that took engineers 10 years to decode. What did they find when they decoded? Not only did he use all that weight, but he doubled the mass up above. He reduced the column energy strength by 3 in order to put forth this fraudulent theory for NIST. And NIST still relies on this theory for their column failure theory. It's completely rigged in favor of a collapse. So this has been refuted by engineers in peer-reviewed papers, in papers that they submitted to the American Society of Civil Engineers Journal of Engineering Mechanics, but they won't publish it. Why? They say it's out of scope. Wait a minute. How is it out of scope to publish a challenge to a previously published paper in that journal? That's what we do in peer-reviewed science. That's the whole nature of it. So there's ethics violations filed, lawsuit filed, and that's pending. We got to ask ourselves a pretty serious question with the Twin Towers. We have also the evidence of heat, extreme heat, which we looked at earlier, and thermite incendiaries. Together, this with all of the other 9 key characteristic features of controlled demolition, this is proof of controlled demolition. We'll get to that. But how did they access this building? Well, look where the planes hit, and look at the coincidence of fireproofing upgrades in these buildings. Is it possible that this wasn't fireproofing that they were upgrading, but nano-thermite applied to the bottom of the concrete slabs? Yeah, it's possible. Could this have been an undercover operation? Fascinating. And they do have liquid applied fireproofing. It's called intumescent paint. So is it possible they used nano-thermite instead of intumescent paint? It's possible. We need a real investigation. But we know this much from Kevin Ryan and his blog site, digwithin.net, that we have important possible research here that needs to be expounded on with subpoena power. Is it possible that if we had access to the core columns, to the elevators in the building, which are in the center, of course, we could have had access to the core columns and beams which surround all of them? Is it possible that explosives could be applied to the core columns and beams in the building from the elevator shafts? Yeah. 2 inches of gypsum board. Well, that would create a lot of dust. A whole lot of dust if you've ever worked with gypsum board before.
That I have.
Listen to the evidence, the testimony of Scott Forbes, Senior Database Administrator for Fiduciary Trust.
It was probably the week leading up to 9/11. Every morning I'd come in around 7 a.m. and the dust was incredible. It was filthy. It was like the cleaners weren't cleaning. Right where the windows were, there was a sill which enclosed radiators. I was sick to death of the dust which was appearing on the windowsills. It was dirty grey and very, very noticeable in that week leading up to 9/11.
Wow. That's a pretty interesting coincidence, isn't it? And Susan Lindauer talks about white vans that were brought in the weeks before 9/11. And she'd never seen them before. So another coincidence that needs subpoena power to get to the bottom of this. But wouldn't it help if there was an elevator modernization going on in the building? Well, there was. Documented in Elevator World, March 2001, the largest elevator modernization in the world. Ace Elevator had the contract. They came out of nowhere to get this contract, beating Otis Elevator, who had installed and had been maintaining these elevators up to the time of 9/11. Where was Ace Elevator employees? 85 of them. Well, 50 of them, it says here, per Dan Boyle, were called out to a union meeting that day to discuss business. So they weren't available to help the firefighters. Another coincidence? What happened to the steel? Easily the largest and most perplexing structural failures in history. 400 truckloads a day were hauled to China for recycling before investigators could get their hands on it and do a proper investigation. This is the illegal destruction of evidence in a crime scene, prompting Bill Manning, editor-in-chief of Fire Engineering magazine, to cry out crucial evidence that could answer many questions is on the slow boat to China, showing an astounding ignorance of government officials to the value of a thorough scientific investigation. The destruction and removal of evidence must stop immediately. But it didn't. And we're left with 10 key characteristic features of controlled demolition and some very uncharacteristic features, like incendiaries. None of these features, again, can be attributed to fire, the official cause of this building's collapse, let alone all of them, with additional circumstantial evidence and corroborative testimony. This is proof of controlled demolition, a body of proof, again, that's convinced 3,600 architects and engineers to sign on to the petition, many of whom appear in our forthcoming film, which you can co-produce and be an executive producer of with a donation of $500 and a donation of $10. You'll live forever in our hearts as we're able then to complete the post-production activity. We filmed the whole thing. We're just putting it together. It's a lot of editing. We need your guys' help to continue that process. We're on episode 4. There's 12 altogether. So help us out. And know that There's documentaries that are really good with 40 high-rise architects, structural engineers, metallurgists, chemists, physicists, controlled demolitions. In 9/11, explosive evidence experts speak out, laying out all the evidence. A 15-minute professional documentary narrated by actor Ed Asner just on Building 7, 15 minutes alone. And the movie about that University of Alaska study by Professor Leroy Halsey at the university. He and his team of engineers are interviewed and by Dylan Avery, the maker of Loose Change, whom you'll remember.
Yep. Yeah.
Rye. And so you can also download the outline of evidence that we've discussed here for free and print it, get it to everybody. It's all available at our website, richardgage911.org. And we got to get to the truth. We got to get it out because it's a dark truth, much darker than we've ever been led to believe and much different. Where do you draw your line in the sand after all? Do you wait for the next 9/11? Well, guess what? It's already been upon us. The false disease and the false solution for the false disease that's been given to us over the last 4 years. We have got to wake up and speak the truth, or we're going to get more false flag operations. That's what we needed to bring to your attention tonight, Rye, and your viewers, wonderful viewers out there.
That was amazing, Richard. That was more than I could have asked. I really want to say thank you. That was very in depth, and I think that's the important part, that it has to be. It has to be very in depth because you're competing with a lot of people who are like, oh, that's been debunked. Oh, that's been this. That's been that. It's very important, and for you that are listening or watching, go check out his website. Look into all this for yourself. Listen to what he's saying, but look into it yourself. That's the bottom line, is that we have to start, listening, but looking into things for ourselves. We have to make up our own decisions, our own minds, because it's led us down into a dark, dark, scary road by listening to everyone else, listening to the news, listening to the political affiliates, the talking mouthpieces. That has gotten us into this craziness right now. And like you said, these last 5 years have been ridiculous, and it's because we've allowed it. We've believed everything that's being told to us, and like you said, there's more things that are coming in. We were just talking about before this about the climate lockdowns in Canada that are happening now, and it's because it's being allowed. People are allowing it to happen. We got to realize that we have the power, we have the ability to stop this, but we need to come together and actually see the truth for what it is.
Yeah, we really do. And that's why I've been speaking all over the country. We've got a conference coming up. I encourage everybody to come see us in Washington, D.C. Senator Ron Johnson will be speaking, former Congressman Kurt Weldon, former presidential candidate Dennis Kucinich, John Kiriakou will be there. Many of us experts in the 9/11 Truth Movement, architects, engineers, and others. It's going to be extraordinary. September 10th through the 12th. And you can learn more about this at our website, richardgage911.org, and it'll be live streamed if you can't come. So find out how to see the live stream for free.
I implore everybody just to do that. Question everything, and it's your right to question things. Don't be discouraged by people, pointing out at you like, oh, you're one of those conspiracy theorists. You just have to believe it. I mean, you have to look into it yourself. Richard, I want to say I don't want to keep you any longer because we're going a little bit long here, but I want to say thank you so much for putting together such a detailed presentation. And again, everybody go check out Richard on his website. And Richard, one last time, where is that website, or what is the address to it again?
richardgage911.org.
Thank you, Richard, so much. And thank you to your wife, Gail, as well. I appreciate everything you guys are doing.
Yes. Thank you so much, Rye. Appreciate you.
Thank you. All right, everyone. What a conversation. Richard really shows us that when you start pulling at the threads of 9/11, the whole thing it really starts to unravel. And that's the thing. It's not just about these buildings coming down. It's about the truth, the accountability, and not being afraid to ask the questions that everyone else just avoids. So, like I always say, everyone, if this stirs something in you, don't just let it sit. Go look into it for yourself. Connect the dots and see what feels right. Because at the end of the day, critical thinking isn't crazy. It is necessary. And I think that's it for tonight, my friends, for this journey. So until next time, keep your curiosity wandering, keep the light lit, and always find your way home.
Beneath the stars where shadows grow, the Nephilim's echoes whisper low. Bigfoot roams through the forest deep, and Dogman prowls where the brave won't sleep. Across lost history we wonder why, seeking the truth that time tried to hide. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. UFOs streak through the velvet skies. Aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks. In the void of secrets, a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the Codex flame is a light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. Through the velvet skies, aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks. In the void of secrets, a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the Codex flame is a light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. Legends rise from the Earth's deep core, a lost legacy we can't ignore. With every step, the veil grows thin, revealing worlds where the strange begins. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. Giants, cryptids that